For weeks now, we've been hearing about OpenAI's newest AI model. And finally, on Thursday, OpenAI released the much-anticipated GPT-5. So today on the podcast, we're giving you a GPT-5 update. How revolutionary is it? What's different about it? And what does it mean for the future of OpenAI? Here to help us unpack all things GPT-5 is Fortune's AI editor, Jeremy Kahn. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us again on the show. And I know you're on vacation, so we really appreciate you making time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me on again, Rana.
Right off the bat, what are your first impressions of GPT-5?
Yeah, I think it's a very good model. There were people who were expecting, this would be the AGI kind of moment. And I don't think it's quite that. It's a very good model. It definitely shows some improvement over what was available before. It's a leap forward, but not maybe a massive leap forward.
For our listeners who have not yet had a chance to play with it, is there anything different or noteworthy about the interface?
Yeah, so this is the first time OpenAI has had a model where you don't have to pick whether you want to use reasoning capabilities or use something that's a faster response where it draws simply from the pre-training data. Before, the interface required you to select which model you wanted to answer your query. Now you can just ask the question. The model itself decides how to answer that question, whether it should use reasoning, whether it shouldn't use reasoning, how long it should think, quote unquote, think about the answer. And all that, wasn't the case before. So part of the way GPT-5 works is a kind of router system. It's actually a family of models, and it's going to determine which of those models to send your prompt to based on the content of the prompt. This is something that others, some of the competing models providers had already built into systems. So if this was true with Gemini 2.5 Pro from Google, and it was also true with the Claude 4 series from Anthropic, those models also had this ability to decide based on your query how to answer that prompt. This was not true before with OpenAI's ChatGPT, and now it is. So that's the biggest difference in the interface.
Do you have a sense of how different was the training process? Like, did they train on just more data or different data? Like, what's different in the back end?
Yeah, I think we don't entirely know. They have said that it is a family of models of various sizes. Some of them are very fast, and usually if it's very fast, often those models are fairly lightweight. They're fairly small, right. And they've been trained on highly curated data. And it may be for certain tasks, if for instance coding or math tasks, that they've created very fine-tuned models that will handle those particular queries. And then maybe for some other types of queries, if it's a complicated logic problem where you do need a lot of reasoning, they may have used models that are quite a bit larger and take a lot more time to think. We don't know exactly how they trained it. We know it performs particularly well on coding, so they almost certainly gave it highly curated data sets on coding. We know it does slightly better at performing some English writing tasks, so they may have also created some refined data sets to evaluate and kind of post-train the model on those tasks. There's clearly something they did in terms of training that's different. What exactly that is, they're not telling us.
It's, black box for now. Is there anything different about the personality or the tone?
Yeah, so one of the things that they've done is actually allow you to select four different personality types. Particularly, this is the case if you use the voice mode, and you can get it to answer in different ways. One of them is I think they call it the cynic, which is going to be more skeptical. It's going to be more sarcastic in how it answers. One is called the listener. It's more empathetic. There's one called the robot, which they thought might be better for what OpenAI said is maybe it's better for business use cases where you just want a kind of a very concise answer, very factual, and so you can adjust the tone based on these sort of four different personality types. That's another difference in how the interface works with GPT-5.
Yeah. There's been a lot of hype about GPT-5 and a lot of anticipation the past several weeks. There are some critics that are saying that the hype is basically a marketing ploy to drive engagement. What do you think?
Yeah, like I said, I think it is a very good model, but is it is it orders of magnitude different than anything we've seen from competitors? And the answer is no. So to some extent, there is a bit of hype here.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because you had someone like Sam Altman saying, "Oh, this is the first model where it really feels like you're talking with a PhD level researcher on any topic." And I don't know. In my experimentation with it so far, I'd say, yeah, I mean, it's good, but do I really feel like I'm talking to a PhD level researcher on every topic? I'm not so sure. One of the analogies that Altman used in the press conference where they announced this model was to say it was a bit like when iPhones started having Retina display cameras, Retina level cameras instead of the old sort of pixelated cameras. Yeah, that was a big leap forward in photography. But it wasn't as big a leap forward, I'd say, as like going from the pre-iPhone era to the iPhone era. And I think some people were expecting, given the hype around this, that this would be a similar kind of leap from going from like the pre-smartphone era to having smartphones. And it's clearly not that. This is an upgrade in features. It's a difference of degree, but not a difference of kind.
Yeah. I love that difference in degree, but not a difference of kind. Okay, so let's unpack how it's doing better on some of these benchmarks. And I want to start with the model's coding capabilities. How much better is it? And also, what does that mean for some of these platforms like Cursor and Windsurf and Lovable that are basically packaging some of these coding capabilities and have done really well as companies?
Yeah. So the coding capabilities are definitely better. They are about 8 to 10% better on a lot of coding benchmarks than the previous O3 model from OpenAI. They did not provide benchmarking against competing models from other providers, but we're starting to see some of those evaluations come out from third parties, and it looks like it's pretty good, but maybe not quite as good as Claude 4 still at coding. So it's sort of in the range. It's definitely better than what OpenAI had available before. Now, on their benchmark, so they have one benchmark that's called the SWE benchmark, which stands for software engineer. According to OpenAI's own evaluations on that, it is better. It is the best model out there. It gets 75% on that benchmark, which is very good. It is like about 8% better than anything else out there on those questions. But again, in some third-party evaluations, people are saying they don't prefer the answers as much as what Claude 4 has produced. What this means for those companies that are sort of like Cursor, that are those companies are kind of wrappers around various models. And so for them, it's great. I think they get to move these capabilities into their system. It may require, as every new model release does for these companies, require them to do some work on the back end themselves because they use a lot of kind of meta prompting strategies where there are prompts that you may not be aware of as a user that are taking place in the background. And every time these models are upgraded, the way those prompts are answered changes slightly. So I'm sure they have a little bit of work to do, but in general, it's good for them because it just gives them a more capable system to play around with. It should be good for the users of all of those kind of wrapper products.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the lower hallucination rates. Is there any data to back this up?
Yeah, so they again did evaluations of the model's own hallucination rates. That's in the system card for GPT-5. But again, it's compared to their own previous models. It's not compared in the system card to any competing models from different providers. Now, according to their data, it is significantly better at in terms of factual accuracy. But what you should note though is it's still GPT-5 in kind of the main mode still has a hallucination rate where it's about 10%. And even in the what they have called the thinking mode, where the model uses its reasoning abilities and takes a long time to provide responses, in general that usually produces better, more factually accurate results. But even there, you're talking about they've gotten the hallucination rate down to I think 4.8 or 4.9%. But that still means about 1 out of every 20 times you're gonna have an inaccuracy. So it does seem from some of the third-party evaluations that have been done and some of the third-party comparison of benchmarks various people have published, self-evaluations, that it's about on par with Gemini 2.5 Pro in terms of hallucination rate. And again, maybe slightly better than Claude 4, but but it's close. So yeah, that's what we know so far.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think this affects OpenAI's kind of business against some of its competitors? I mean, it sounds to me that they're still neck to neck,
Yeah, I think they're very close. So over the last basically 6 months, it seemed like they had actually kind of lost their pole position. It was, on a lot of things, Claude was better. And then Gemini 2.5 Pro was a very good model. It came out on top on a lot of benchmarks. So this allows them to claim, I think, that they're back in the lead by a little bit. So they caught back up and pulled maybe slightly ahead, but they're not ahead by miles on a lot of this. But I think what it does is if you were already a heavy user of ChatGPT and you had a pro subscription, I mean, they've basically given you a reason not to switch to somebody else. If you were considering, abandoning it and go, thinking, oh, I think, Anthropic's Claude is so much better now, or Gemini is really good now, maybe I should consider dropping my OpenAI subscription. They've basically given you a reason not to do that. And meanwhile, the other thing to note about OpenAI is they're very focused on the consumer business, and they've rolled GPT-5 out to everyone, including the people who just use the free version of the service. And I think for a lot of those people who will not have even maybe played around with the reasoning models before because they weren't available to the free users prior to this, they may be kind of blown away by how much better this is compared to what they had before. And it may bring in even more consumer users. They're now have said they have about 700 million active weekly users. It's a big number. And they may even gain more users now that this model is available. So I think in terms of their consumer business, this is good. Also, in terms of their enterprise business, for the people who use their API, they've priced this pretty aggressively. They have matched the pricing that Google offers for Gemini 2.5, and they have way undercut actually what Anthropic charges for Claude 4.1 Opus. So I think they may find that a lot of businesses, are going to switch to using them or swap them in, and it may be very good for their enterprise business.
Yeah. While we're at it, so OpenAI is allegedly selling shares held by current and former employees at a price that values the company at $500 billion. And one theory is that a little liquidity will stop staff basically from jumping ship to Meta or X or Anthropic. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what they're doing. I'm sure that's the reason for the secondary share sale. They've been losing staff to Meta. Meta's been on this huge campaign of poaching staff from other AI companies for this new super intelligence unit that Meta has set up, and they've literally been offering $100 million, dollar signing bonuses, and in some cases even more than that, to lure top researchers. There was even some reports that they were offering, one particular researcher shares that might have been worth $1 billion in Meta. I mean, it's like incredible amounts of money. And we know that when they hired Alex Wang from Scale, they basically did this deal where they made a huge investment in Scale for $14.7 billion. So they're spending tons of money to poach talent. And OpenAI has, been trying to counter those offers to keep staff, and I think they've been struggling a little bit. And this secondary share sale would definitely, give a reason for a lot of their employees to stick around.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? It's an incredible time to be an AI talent for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in other news around OpenAI, they appear to be acknowledging that they kind of need to address the issue that a lot of people are using ChatGPT for mental health support. And so they've set up a mental health advisory board. They've also implemented some new guardrails to prevent users from kind of viewing and using the chatbot as a therapist. Can you talk more about that? I think this is actually very important, not just for kind of the raw OpenAI models, but for a lot of the companies that sit on top of it that are addressing mental health and addiction or suicide prevention, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like it's one of the primary, it's a huge use case for these chatbots, is people using them essentially as kind of therapists, and using them in ways that the users often feel like is improving their mental health. But there has been some documented cases also of people who have, had detrimental effects on their mental health from conversations with these chatbots, particularly sort of going down rabbit holes on conspiracy theories and those sorts of things. So I think they're very much a double-edged sword. OpenAI keeps saying, look, we didn't train this to be a therapist. It's not a doctor. It doesn't, shouldn't necessarily be used in that way, but I think users are doing it anyway. So they've done some things to try to provide disclaimers to users. But it's not true that, the models will. They haven't created a situation where the model will refuse to provide sort of therapy-like advice. They have tried to make that advice safer. So, the model should not tell you that it's okay to self-harm or anything like that. And if you show suicidal thoughts, they now have the model sort of recommend that you seek outside help. So these are good. These are good things. I think some people would like them to go further and say, that really the model should refuse to act as a therapist at all. But I guess it's a fine line between sort of being an empathetic listener and acting as a kind of friendly companion and acting as a therapist. And I think they're finding it hard to kind of straddle that divide. And I think also they don't necessarily want to. I mean, it's such a popular use case that I think actually they don't want to discourage users too much from doing this. I think actually they're quite happy. It makes the model very engaging in a lot of ways. People who are using it as a therapist are not likely to abandon using the model. So I don't know. I think they're a little bit two-faced sometimes on this stuff when it comes to this issue of should people be using chatbots as kind of mental wellness tools.
Yeah. What's interesting is they also tout GPT-5 as being much better on health-related questions.
Right.
I certainly use ChatGPT to answer health-related questions. I upload our medical, like my blood tests and whatnot.
Right.
What are they claiming around that?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of an example of what I was sort of alluding to, is that on the one hand, they're very eager to say, oh, it's not a doctor. It's not, it doesn't have medical training. It certainly is not supposed to be a therapist. And yet, they know that people are using it in this way, and they're now touting very explicitly how good it is at answering these health questions. So I feel like, again, it's a little bit of doublespeak there on some of this. They keep saying, look, there's no patient-doctor confidentiality here, and this is not necessarily, their backend is not HIPAA compliant. But anyway, getting back to what OpenAI said about the health performance of these models, they did evaluations on how it does, with health questions, and they're saying it does much better than any previous model out there, and they have claimed it's better than competing models at essentially making diagnoses, which is interesting. Again, this is an area where they know users like to use chatbots in this way, find it very helpful, and they're very much leaning into this as a kind of consumer-facing product, and this is part of that.
There's been this image that's been circulating on social media, and it's basically a graph showing the amount of tokens processed on OpenAI, which is of course representative of usage. Have you seen this, and what's your take? They're basically like, it's a lot of usage, and then on June 6th, it really drops. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, I've seen this. So yeah, a lot of people have used this to say, aha, the people who are really using ChatGPT are students, both in high school and university level, and it dropped then because by then is when sort of most schools were letting out, and kids are just using these models to cheat rampantly, and that's the primary use case of ChatGPT, and those are the power users of ChatGPT. It's not coders. It turns out it's students, cheating on homework. I mean, to the extent that we know that the token usage graph is accurate, I mean, I do think students are a big user group. It is true that students are using these models a lot, they're using it a lot for schoolwork. Now,
right.
Some of that's cheating, and some of that may actually be quite legitimate use cases. One of the things that OpenAI did before actually releasing GPT-5 is the week before, they had rolled out this new study mode for ChatGPT, where you can specifically ask it to act as a tutor, take on the role of a tutor, and it won't then give away the answers directly to you. It kind of leads you through Socratic questioning towards the answer yourself. It can literally create a whole curriculum for you, walk you through topics. It's actually quite powerful. My Fortune colleague, Sharon Goldman, wrote a column about this. She said she'd been terrible at high school algebra and had always been really ashamed of it. And then with study mode, she literally had it create an algebra curriculum for her and walked her through it. And I think, this is one of the great use cases of these things. And I think things like study mode are fantastic.
So I want to come back to something Sam Altman said during a press briefing about GPT-5. And he basically said this is a significant step along the path towards artificial general intelligence. Why do you think he said so?
Oh, well, they've been hyping this model for a long time. So we know that their goal as a company is to explicitly, achieve AGI and make sure that its benefits are accrue widely to all of humanity. That is still their stated mission. So saying that's a significant step towards AGI, I think is a way of saying, look, we're still on this mission. We're still in the leadership pole position in this race to get to AGI and beyond. And I think this whole thing about AGI, it's a very undefined term, as you know.
Anyway, right.
I don't think anybody really knows what that means anymore. And we don't have a good benchmark just for AGI. So it's unclear, how close are we really? Are we closer than we were yesterday? Yeah, probably a little bit, but how much is very hard to tell.
Yeah. Altman also said, and I love this, this is not a model that continuously learns as it's deployed from new things it finds, which is something that to me feels like it should be part of AGI. I totally agree with that. Because again, for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with how this works, they're basically training a new model, deploying it, and then it's this model that's in production. It's not updating itself on the go. And I do feel like that ought to be part of AGI.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Continuous learning, I think would definitely need to be part of AGI. Something about learning efficiency too is not really taken into account. Humans can learn from very few examples. It's not totally clear that this is what happens with these models. I do think there's several bits of this that are still not there.
Alrighty. So to close us out, is GPT-5 revolutionary? And does it tell us about where AI is heading?
I would say GPT-5 is, again, it's a good model, but it's not revolutionary. It's very much an evolutionary step in the development of these models. It is not some, great discontinuous leap forward. It tells you actually how bad the evaluations are because I think OpenAI even said this. It's like, this model has good vibes. I mean, that is like what a lot of people, it's like, it feels better than the other models. It's like, there is sort of something to that, but it's also like a really unscientific way to evaluate things. I don't know. But look, OpenAI still has the largest user base of any of these competing products. And putting this capability in the hands of so many people is significant.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. This was so helpful.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rana.